At the beginning of all of our services recently, we've been doing the one-word videos. And if you don't remember, back in January, we did the one-word series. Hopefully a lot of you still have your one-word magnets. But it was kind of our New Year's resolution. Instead of making a list of all these resolutions and trying to keep all of them and typically failing, we decided this New Year to just pick one word and kind of make that word be your focus for what you wanted to accomplish or change or, kind of center your life around. And a lot of people picked words, and now that we're about halfway through the year, we're coming back and looking at those words and seeing, how am I doing? Am I actually focusing on this? And if I have, what have I gained from it? And I'm actually going to be your one-word video today because my word was kind of inspired by this scripture that Linda just read, and specifically in verse 11. My one word for 2016 was the word zeal, and verse 11 says, "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord." And if you don't know some of those words, don't feel bad, because that's how I got here too. I remember reading this and being like, I'm never supposed to be lacking in this thing. I'm not really even sure what it means, but I better look it up because I'm supposed to have it. So I looked up zeal and fervor, and basically what those things mean is just passion, to never be lacking in your passion for God, be on fire for God and for serving the Lord. And as I read that passage and looked up those words, I kind of started to look at my life, and I think that my faith was kind of stagnant at that point in January when I looked at it. And maybe a lot of you have experienced that period of time where you're not that passionate about your faith anymore. You're not excited about it. You come to church just because it's part of the routine and it's Sunday and that's what you do, but you're not really looking forward to it so much. You go to small group, you read your Bible, you pray, maybe it's part of your routine, or maybe your passion's so gone that you're not even really doing those things anymore. Maybe you're kind of completely out of the routine. But I think it's kind of a normal part of faith that we have these high moments, but we also kind of have those moments where we just don't feel it. Like we just don't have the passion. We get stuck in the routine. And that's kind of where I was at of, working here. So I was here. I went through the routine. I went through the motions. But I didn't have that passion anymore. So back in January when I read this Romans passage and looked up zeal and all those words, I was like, that's going to be my word for 2016. I'm gonna focus on what it looks like to get that passion back, to be on fire for God. How can I keep that and have that always be a part of my life? And as I kind of looked at this scripture more, as it kind of became my verse for my one word, I looked at another version of the Bible called The Message. Maybe some of you have read it. It's an American pastor wrote it, and what he did is he rewrote the whole Bible, kind of putting it into more modern terms, a little more relatable in some ways. Sometimes we read this verse, keep zeal and fervor, and we're like, we have no idea what that means. So what this guy did is went through and rewrote, and in verse 11, this is how he rewrote this verse. Don't burn out, keep yourselves fueled and aflame. And so that's kind of easier for us to understand, because what it basically means is be on fire for God, keep fueled, keep aflame, try to stay passionate, of course. And I have to give this disclaimer since it's the 4th of July, as I talk about being on fire for God. It does not mean literally. Tomorrow, tonight, if it stops raining, don't say, Leandra was talking about fire a lot. I'm pretty sure we're supposed to take these. We're supposed to be on fire. I don't work for the ambulance anymore, so I can't help you if that happens. So disclaimer, that's not what I'm saying. It's a metaphor going forward. And we're talking about being on fire for God, being passionate for God, not literally on fire. And when we look at zeal, it's not always used in the Bible to talk about zeal for God. Sometimes we're zealous about other things. A big one here, we're zealous about our football team, the Huskers. I'm from Iowa, and at the first service, I made a Husker joke, and then Chad reminded me, you guys have 5 national championships. We have 0. So I cut the Husker joke out until next year. I have to wait until we get one of those before I can crack jokes at all you guys. But I looked up the real definition of zeal and what it means, and it's a great energy or enthusiasm for a cause or objective. So you can have zeal, you can be zealous, passionate for the Huskers, for your favorite hobby, for whatever it is. If you're lucky, maybe you're passionate about your job. And this weekend, we've seen it, and we'll see it especially tomorrow, people having a lot of zeal for America, for their country. 4th of July is basically a holiday where we express our passion for America, being thankful to live here, being really excited about that. And last week, I know I promised you guys I wouldn't talk about Europe every week, but I think you guys knew that I was going to break that anyway. So I have one more story. But when I was over there, it was kind of funny because, we're used to the 4th of July. We're pretty patriotic year-round. I realized other countries don't always have that same zeal for their country that we do. And these people from New Zealand were like, oh, you're from America. And, you always get the typical America questions. And they were like, is it true that in America you guys, worship the American flag? And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think that. And they were like, yeah, in the movies, you guys have to, stand and put your hand on your heart and, pray to the American flag. And I was like, oh, yeah, we do that in our school. And then later, I, had my Facebook up, and I was going through, and it just happened to be Memorial Day, the day they asked me that. So on my Facebook, it's all American flags and people's pictures of their American flag. And one of the New Zealand people looks over and was like, are you serious? You're trying to tell me you guys don't worship the American flag. And I was like, it's just this one day and the 4th of July and most of the summer. But, people get really passionate about America. And I think when we think about being passionate for God, some people are like, that's not really my personality. I'm not the person who lifts my hands and closes my eyes when I sing, and I'm not the person who wants to get up and talk, and, passion is for those other people. But I think passion can look a lot of different ways, whether you're extroverted, introverted, whatever you are. When you see people tomorrow, you'll see people expressing their passion in different ways. There's the extroverted, really loud people who are going to be dressed like an American flag and then have American flags painted and tattoos down their arms, and they're going to do the fireworks and they're going to do all that. And that's their way of expressing their passion. But then, there's the more introverted, passionate people who maybe they wear red, white, or blue, not all three. Maybe they get two. They're not going to paint stuff on their face. They're not going to be as loud. Maybe to express their passion, they do something else. They maybe eat 10 hot dogs, which is just as American. And, maybe they express it that way. And it's the same way when I talk about being passionate for God. It doesn't have to look like the same as someone else. If someone else wants to lift up their hands and get really into worship and that's not your thing, you can still express your passion in a lot of different ways. When it comes to being passionate about God, it's not one size fits all. But like this verse said, it's definitely something we should all have in some way or another. We should all try to avoid burning out and keep ourselves fueled in a flame and be on fire for God, like Romans says. And I think when Romans brings this up, as he's listing all these rules, he throws this one in, never be lacking in zeal, don't burn out, keep on fire for God. It seems, thrown in with all these other commandments. But when we look at, when Jesus talks about it, he actually really cares about this. He really cares if we're passionate. And there's a part in Matthew where he actually tells us it's the first and most important thing. In Matthew 22, the Pharisees, the kind of religious teachers, come up to him and just ask him straight up, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? What is the most important thing? And so Jesus isn't trying to be tricky here. This is the most important commandment. He replies, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And so when you look at that, Jesus is basically saying the first and most important commandment is for you to be super passionate about me, to give your heart, soul, and mind into worshiping me, into being in that relationship with me. That is the most important thing to him. And in that Message version of the Bible that I talked about earlier, they word it in another interesting way that I think kind of puts it in more relatable terms for us. In the Message, it says, the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. Everything you have, this is the first and greatest commandment. So the first and greatest thing that we can do is be on fire and passionate about God, give him everything we have. And I think when we look at that, it's not just because Jesus wants us to give him everything we have, to be obsessed with him. It's not a self-centered thing. I think some of us can look at that and be like, of course Jesus says the most important thing is for us to be obsessed with him, because that's what he wants. I think there's more to it than that. And I think the main reason that's the first and most important commandment, the thing that we really need to focus on the most, is because that's what God deserves. He deserves our passion. He deserves our all for us to be on fire. If we give anything less than that, it's kind of insulting after everything he's done for us. It's kind of like at Christmas when you know someone's getting you a gift and you try to like get something equal. There was one of our friends at home, Matt, and he would always like ask everyone to find out what he was getting, and then he would go get gifts that cost almost exactly the same. And that was how he did Christmas. He wanted to make sure it was equal. And so when we think about it that way, if we come up to Christmas and God's there, he's going to show up and he's going to be like, so for Christmas this year, same as all the other years, I got you, forgiveness for everything bad you did, salvation, you get to go to heaven now. Also, every blessing you had this year was also for me, your friends and family, your health, all those prayers that God answered were for me. So Merry Christmas, here's all this stuff. And if we show up with like one of those Yankee candles that we always get our moms, it does not equal the balance there of everything that God's given us. So when we look at all those things, God deserves our passion. He deserves us to be on fire. He deserves everything because it's still not going to add up. He deserves our attention, our priority, our love, our energy, all those things. He deserves for us to be passionate about him. And the second reason I think that being on fire and passionate is really important to Jesus and why it's the first and most important thing is because when we're passionate as Christians, when we're on fire for God, other people that aren't Christian are going to see that and they're going to be drawn in to what we're doing. When you're really excited and on fire about something, people are going to see it and be like, what do they have that I don't? What's going on at that church? At the end of the summer here, when we do that We Serve Sunday and we leave the church and we go out and serve all around West Omaha in our matching T-shirts and stuff, I think people that aren't in Water's Edge see that. They see these groups going out, serving, having a good time, being passionate, and they're like, what is going on in Millard West on Sunday mornings? When they see us doing that, they want to know what's going on. Our passion's not just for God and not just for us, but it also, attracts other people to what we have going on. And when I was at Creighton for my undergrad, I was in a sorority for some reason. And if you know anything about me, I'm not like a sorority girl at all. But I was still in one. I stayed in all 4 years, which means I had 4 years of this wonderful week called recruitment. If you were in the Greek system in undergrad or you know about it, recruitment is basically like speed dating with freshmen. And they bring in all the freshmen, and you meet them all, and you do songs and dances. It's so fun. And you really do. And you come and you meet all the freshmen, and it's basically like you trying to convince them that your sorority is better than the other sororities, and they should want to join yours. And then they vote at the end, and whatever, it turns out it divides up all the girls into the new sororities. And so when you're like me and you're not that passionate about sorority life or about your sorority, hope my sisters don't watch this sermon. I think they already knew, though. But I wasn't very passionate about it, so I was not good at recruitment. Because when freshmen would come through, they could tell that I didn't really care. And when they come up and they ask you, oh, yeah, like, what do you love about Theta Phi? Like, why should I join Theta Phi? I'd be like, it's good. I'd be like, you should really try intramurals. And, like, I would talk to people about intramurals because that's what I was actually passionate about. But if you're not passionate about your sorority, you're going to be really bad at recruitment. And by senior year, I just didn't talk to the freshmen. I was just kind of there as moral support. But it's the same with our faith. If you're not going to be passionate, if you're not on fire and don't care, not only are people not going to want to join, but they're going to be like, well, why would we ever go there? Those people drag themselves there every Sunday morning, and they don't even like it. Like, I'm not going to want to do that. And so the first reason God deserves it. Second reason, if we're not passionate, people are not going to want to join us. They're not going to care what we're doing. The last reason that I think Jesus kind of put this up as the most important commandment to be passionate is for ourselves as well. Because if you've ever had that on fire, really passionate time in your life, we have the mission trips coming up. If you've ever been on one of those or maybe went to Belize or one of those, you know that mission trip is kind of that on-fire moment for you. That week, you're super passionate, you come home, you're excited, you'll see all the middle school and high school kids come back really on fire for God. Same with retreats. different things that get you on fire. Maybe there was a really great Sunday morning service. The intern was preaching, and she was really great, and you just felt really on fire. I'm the intern, if you didn't know. And so this is one of those services. But maybe like you leave those service, you feel really on fire, passionate. It's a great feeling. Not only does God deserve it and other people see it, but it leaves you feeling better. When we're in those high moments where we feel on fire, we love God better, we love others better, we're happier, we serve better, we worship better. It just makes us better and happier people when we have that fire burning. And there's an author who wrote about passion in general, but I think it relates a lot to our passion for God. And he said, "One person with passion is better than 40 people merely interested." So going back to recruitment, one person really passionate about Theta Phi is going to recruit a lot more people than 40 of us who are just merely interested in it. And the same is true with our faith. One person who comes in here and is really passionate is going to serve this church better, is going to worship God more, is going to bring more people in, is just going to be happier overall than 40 of us who are merely interested in just dragging ourselves in here every morning because we feel like we're supposed to. So, despite all these reasons to stay on fire, for God, for ourselves, for others, all these things, it sounds so great, but I think we all know, if you've been following Jesus for any length of time, the fire eventually goes out. Maybe you're in that time right now where, you are just forcing yourself to get through the motions, but you do not feel it right now. You do not feel the passion. You do not feel on fire. You're not excited about it. It doesn't mean you're a bad Christian. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It's just kind of a fact of life that, it goes up and down, and that's just how it goes. There's going to be times where we're on fire, and there's going to be times where it's really hard. And this weekend on the 4th of July, hopefully if it stops raining, because otherwise it'll ruin my whole analogy, but, 4th of July is a big bonfire weekend, right? We go to lakes, we go outside, we go see fireworks, and we sit around bonfires. Every 4th of July growing up, my family was at a bonfire. And there's two quick ways you can put out a bonfire at the end of the night. Sometimes you let them burn, but the quick ways to put them out, you can do the fun way, which is spray it with water and it goes up in smoke really fast and goes out right away. And then the other way, we had a fire pit at home that was kind of like one of those bowls, and if the fire was small enough, you just kind of like put the cover on, and then it slowly goes out because it doesn't have any oxygen. And those are kind of the two ways you can put out a fire. And using that as in relation to our fire for God, they go out in the same two ways. There's water that happens, and sometimes there's cover on our fires, and both of them lead to us kind of losing that passion for God. And when I think of like the water in life that kind of comes in unexpected and just puts our fire right out before we know it, those are like the bad things that happen in our lives. Those are the things we didn't expect, the things that cause us pain, that hurt us. Maybe we're angry. Those are the painful events. Deaths in the family, divorces, broken relationships, financial problems, losing a job, maybe your dream fell apart, maybe your kid's a teenager. Those kind of things that just really make it hard for us to stay passionate and joyful. That's the water that comes in, and we've all been there, and that is the hardest time to be passionate about God, because pain and hurt and anger does not usually come with passion. Those things tend to be apart, and when water like that comes on our fire, it goes up in smoke, and that can be a really hard time, and maybe a lot of you are in that season where that water has kind of just put your fire right out, and you're up in smoke right now, and you just are not feeling passionate about any of this. And I think there's the water that comes from outside things like that, and there's also kind of the water that we bring upon ourselves. And what that is guilt and shame. When we make a mistake and we hold it over ourselves and punish us and feel guilty and shameful and have these regrets, that can put out a fire too. Because when we're guilty, it's when we need God the most, but because we're guilty, we avoid him the most. And that separation is also going to put a fire out pretty quick. And the one thing I'll say about guilt, that I think a lot of people get confused, especially non-Christians when I talk to them, God doesn't want you to feel guilty. A lot of times we think, well, I was sinning or I broke this rule, like he would want me to punish myself and feel bad about this. But the whole time that we're busy doing that, punishing ourselves for this thing we did, God is standing right there being like, are you going to take this forgiveness? Do you want this forgiveness? He's begging us to take it. He doesn't want our fires to go out because we're too busy punishing ourselves for something that he doesn't even want to punish us for. But yet we still all struggle with guilt and shame and regret that can really put out that passion. And these things, this water, it dumps in, it's unexpected, your fire's going to go out fast. But there's also a slower way where we kind of lose passion, or maybe we don't notice, and slowly it goes down. And before we know it, we're completely out. And that's when you kind of put some of those covers on your fire. And there's a lot of covers I think I realize in myself and in other people. And the first and foremost, I said at the first service, and like everyone nodded their head, because we all do this, especially in America, especially out in West Omaha. And that's just the one of being so busy. Every time I talk to someone here, our schedules are packed. We work, the kids are in 5 sports and a band and choir and 5 activities every night. We run at 100 miles per hour. We're trying to do everything. We sign up for every volunteer opportunity. We sign up for everything that's presented to us at school, and we want to be the involved parent, and we want to be this at work. And we keep going, and we're too exhausted at the end of the day to be passionate about anything, much less our faith in church and spending time with God. And a busy, hectic, crazy life does not breed passion. When you see really passionate people, they have the time and energy for that because they have dedicated to that one thing, and that's going to be their thing, and they're going to be passionate about that. They're not trying to run around and be passionate about 10 things a day. Because when we're too busy and tired, we're not going to come into church passionate. It just doesn't work out. We're going to be too tired. And the example I think of, the thing I'm most passionate about, besides God, obviously, is the Green Bay Packers. And everyone who knows me knows that because it's not a secret at all. You can ask Dan and Mary. I live in their basement. And on Sunday, during Packers games, they know I am not too tired or exhausted to be passionate about the Packers because they can hear me screaming only appropriate things about the game. And they know that I'm passionate about it. But there was one time where I worked all week, volunteered for too many things, I took on too much, and I was so exhausted, and this has never happened to me in my life, I fell asleep during a Packers game. And that's when I knew that I was too busy. Because if you're going to fall asleep during the thing you're most passionate about, you need to slow down. Because passion and busyness do not go together ever. And it's the same in your relationship with God. If you're going to commit to too much and be too busy, you're going to struggle so hard to keep that fire going. And that's the main cover I see people put over their fires is just that busy, hectic schedule. And the other thing I see a lot of people fall into, that kind of cover that comes over them, it happens a lot in the summer, is being cut off from those ministries that help you grow, help you get closer to God. We struggle a lot in the summer. We're busy. There's sports. We're on vacation. We're out of town. There's holidays. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are all here on the 4th of July, but when these things tend to roll around, we tend to see less people here. And summer, it's a hard time to stay connected because we have so much going on and we're just not here. But when we get cut off from those ministries, from those things that help us grow, our fires are slowly going to burn out. And if we decide to take the summer off, or if we have club soccer in the fall and we get cut off then, our fires are going to go out before we know it because you need to be connected to those things to keep them going. Another thing I think we get cut off from a lot that's important is our community. If you're cut off from your Christian community and the people that encourage and inspire you, your fire is not going to last long on your own. Christianity is not an individual activity. It's meant to be done with other people, and if you try to do it on your own, it's going to be really hard. I've tried. It doesn't work. At the Water's Edge, we really encourage and kind of push people into small groups. A lot of you have probably participated in them, and you know the benefits of that. The reason we push them so much is because we really, really believe in community. We see those small groups worshiping together, encouraging each other, praying together. They hang out together. They go to dinner together. And when you're cut off from those Christian communities, you can kind of see that fire and passion go out. And to relate it to kind of football again, there was one time where I went to watch a Packers game at a sports bar with my friends who don't care about football at all. They were not my Packer community. And so during the whole game, they weren't really paying attention. And halfway through the game, I realized I wasn't paying attention anymore. And I was like, Leandra, what are you doing? The Packers are on. You need to, these people are distracting you. And that's kind of how we can get when we're cut off from Christian community, when we're with people who aren't passionate about God, who don't care. We're going to start drifting that way too. You need those people in your life. You need to spend time with them, call them on the phone, set up a lunch date, because without those people, your fire is going to go out as well. And so after all these depressing things about how your fire goes out, there's a happy ending. So there's good news. There's water, there's covers, there's all these things. Maybe you are not feeling passionate right now. You can always get that fire back. Just as many times as we lose fire, we get it back as well. You don't need a mission trip. You don't need a great Sunday service. You don't need those things. There's other ways to feel passionate about God year-round, even in the summer when we're busy and running all over the place and cut off from all those things. And I think the first kind of step to getting your passion back to figuring out how you can get back on track with God is to first go through that list of all those things I just talked about and kind of look at which of these things is killing my passion right now. If you don't feel on fire and excited for God, if you're in that season, go through these things I just went through. Is there water in my life right now? Is there a pain or a hurt or a struggle I'm dealing with that's keeping me from being passionate? Maybe I'm doing it to myself and there's some guilt and shame that I need to deal with and get rid of. Maybe you have a cover on. Maybe you're too busy and tired and exhausted. Maybe you're cut off from ministries because it's summer and you're just never in town on the weekends. Maybe you haven't been in touch with that Christian community in weeks and you kind of forgot what it's like to hang out with people like that. Kind of go through which one of those things do you think is cutting you off, is killing your passion. Maybe it's multiple things that you need to deal with. And I'm going to start with covers because that's an easy fix. If there's a cover, one of those covers on your fire that's slowly putting out your passion for God, you just take it right off. That's easy to fix. If you're busy, slow down. If you've been cut off from ministries, start prioritizing church and reading the Bible and prayer and those kind of things that kind of refuel you up. If you've been cut up from Christian community, find those people that inspire and encourage you. Get together with them this week. Talk to them on the phone. Do something. Get back in touch with those people. That's an easy fix. When it comes to the water and the tough seasons in our life, like I said earlier, that's a little harder because those things don't always go away. When we lose a loved one, we don't just turn around the next day and be like, you know what, I'm done with that. That's more of a process. That's more of you and God working on that hurt and pain. Once you identify what it is that's kind of holding you down, maybe you need to go to God for healing. Maybe you just need to be in touch with Him more. Maybe you need to extend forgiveness to the person that's causing you pain. Maybe you need to accept forgiveness and get rid of that shame and guilt that you've been carrying around. However you need to deal with that water, that's between you and God. It can be a harder process. The end of the story is, though, you can still get that passion back. None of those events, that water that comes into our lives and knocks us down, none of that is permanent. And in the Old Testament, Moses, as he's leading the Israelites, he constantly had to deal with this problem of people losing their passion. He would perform a miracle, they would get super excited. Next thing you know, they're worshiping golden cow statues. He would give them all this bread, they'd be super excited. The next day, they're complaining and they want to go back to slavery because that was way better than following him. They are constantly getting excited about God and losing their fire, having this passion, and then deciding they don't want to go anymore. And maybe you can relate to those people. And as we read through, Moses never really solves this problem. Like when he gets older and gives leadership over to Joshua, who is in charge next, the Israelites are still not good at it. They still go up and down, just like we do. And so Joshua comes in and he's like, how can I get these people to stay on fire for God? How can I keep them passionate and remember all these things God's doing for them? And so as he's leading them out, they come to another sea, and just like Moses parted the Red Sea, God does the same thing through Joshua, and they part the sea and they get through and they're safe and it's a miracle. And once again, all the people are excited and on fire for God. And God kind of comes down to Joshua, and he's like, listen, the people are really on fire right now. We're not going through this thing again where they go up and down. We need to do something to help keep these people to be passionate and to keep them on fire for me and not go up and down all the time. And so God tells Joshua, get your strongest guys. We're going to stack 12 stones here. These are going to be the memorial stones. We're going to stack them here so when people see them, they remember that I parted the sea and saved them, and they remember their passion, and they remember these great things I've done for them and how much I love them. So Joshua, sets up these stones, and these are the memorial stones. And it started to work for the Israelites because every time they would lose their passion, every time they didn't feel on fire, every time they felt like they didn't want to worship God anymore, they would see these stones and be like, wow, remember when God parted that sea for us? That was so awesome. And it would bring them back and they would have that passion again. And I think the same thing can work for us. It's something I've always tried to do when I'm at the bottom and I'm like, I am just not feeling this right now. I am not excited. I don't want to go. I just don't care. I would go to my personal memorial stones, and they would kind of bring me back, and I would remember what it was like to be passionate. I would remember how much God loved me. And I don't actually have a bunch of like stones piled around all my where I live and stuff like that, but we have these kind of symbolic ones. So it's going to be different for everyone. Maybe it's a place. For me, that's a big one. When I grew up, I went to the same church camp every summer, and that is my best, most passionate memories. Those are my best times with God. And it was in Grinnell, Iowa, at the Grinnell campus. And so whenever I would have a low point, whenever my fire was out, me and a friend or just by myself, I would drive to Grinnell, just walk around the campus. Even just being there would kind of bring back those feelings for me. Maybe you have a place like that where something significant happened, or it's just kind of your happy place where you've always been in that good place with God. Maybe you need to go there this week or in the upcoming weeks and kind of get that passion and memory back. Another big one for me is worship music. Same thing at that church camp. There was a song that played at a worship service, and it was a big moment in my life. Whenever I hear that song, it brings me back to that same moment. And there'll be times where I just need to go home and sit and be like, I need to listen to that song right now because I have totally lost it. And every time I hear that, it brings back that same feeling. Maybe you have a song like that. Maybe it's a certain person. Maybe there's a person who has always been your supporter, your encouragement, your inspiration with your faith, and maybe they don't live around, you haven't seen them in a while. Call them up this week. Talk to them on the phone. Every time my good group of Christian friends, whenever we get together, we always leave back on a lot more on fire than when we came together, because those people can really bring you back, those places, those songs. Maybe it's an object, a card, letter. Maybe it's a photo album of a mission trip or something special. We all have these memorial stones. If you've walked with God for any length of time, you can look back and think of, they probably come to you quick. That's a moment when me and God were really close. This was an answered prayer. I forgot about that. This is a person who always encourages me. I need to call them. Those memorial stones are obvious as we look back in our life. So once we get to putting out that water, once we take the covers off, if we still need that kind of spark to bring us back, to bring back our passion and excitement for God again, spend this week looking for those memorial stones. Think back, find them, go to those places, listen to those songs, talk to those people, look at those pictures, and try and find that fire again. Because, like I said, it's the first and most important thing God wants from us. It's what He deserves. It's what other people deserve from us to help them see what's going on here every Sunday morning. And it simply makes us better, happier Christians and people. It makes us better in our relationships with others and better in our relationship with God. So as you kind of think about, maybe what's killing your fire and what memorial stones you need to visit this week or think back on, will you guys just bow your heads and pray with me as I end?